not being afraid to come back with specific changes in their priorities, which could be quite radical. And that would be a radical one. If we were to move that up, that would be radical. It would be just the same as RFA if they come back with something radical about a stadium, like a waterfront stadium's kind of not even in the 20-year plan. But
well, Mr Chairman, that's why I was referring to the permissive tool that enabled them to be innovative.
The front there.
Chair, on that point, I think Councillor Darby, that was the first point he made around the rapid transport network, around planning for it, so it's not a commitment to it. And they are, obviously there's the bus versus light rail study that's currently underway. I do think that's an omission, not having a commentary on rapid transport, including a reference to the airport, because we do know it's a growing and pressing problem that's impacting on Auckland.
But it could be something that's coming a little bit out of left field, to be honest.
I don't think Auckland Transport...
Light rail didn't even feature until 2 years ago.
No, but I don't think Auckland Transport would see it as a left field matter to put on the letter.
But Mr Chairman, it comes out of project prioritisation, and that came out of the need. I mean, if it is to be a prioritisation, it will come up in the evidence that. So I think rather than being too specific, it is better to be dealing with the issues of prioritisation. And it might be, I mean, Bill might wish to speak to it, but the Auckland Transport Alignment Project came out of that, so it might be that you're going to have to modify that.
Sue's going to comment now.
Thank you, Mr Chair. If I could offer a couple of points that I hope trust might bring a little bit of clarity to the matter that's being discussed. I have no doubt that I would expect to see the CCOs, and I'm talking generally here, I'm not just specific to this point about Auckland Transport, come back within their statement of intent. I would expect to see language that refers back to the budget, specifically the annual plan and the long-term plan. So one suggestion I was just discussing with the Chair quietly is that as a way through this, you may wish to look at including some wording, of which I'm happy to help David with, that request that we receive any reprioritisation requests as part of the input to the 2018 LTP refresh. The reason I offer that as a suggestion is that this time next year, believe it or not, we will be sitting here with the LTP consultation material. We're going to start that process of how we start to work up towards the LTP in February of 2017.
All right, now I have 5 more speakers on transport: Sayers, Cashmore, Quacks, Mike Lee and Richard Hills, and I just make the announcement the Environment and Community Committee Working Party meeting, which is for now, has been deferred to Thursday morning at 8:30. Okay, Councillor Sayers.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I'll be speaking in full support of this recommendation. In fact, if it hasn't been moved yet, I'm quite happy to move it as well. I want to... my question will be around the finance and value for money section, and it's really a generic question, Mr Chair. I think Aucklanders should be thanking the Mayor for this move. It suddenly starts to significantly align the CCOs with the Auckland Council strategy. It gives confidence to Aucklanders. And so, yeah, so well done, Mr Mayor. So as well as fighting rate increases, the Mayor and us all as councillors need to be pushing for greater accountability, transparency and accountability in the CCO's operational cost. And you've heard me go on about this all day today. As the governing body, we can't afford to abdicate the monitoring of operational costs to the CEO and his team alone. And we can't afford to just have single-line reporting like we've seen today given to us as councillors. In fact, to succeed as councillors, we really need to be excelling and lifting our game in the discipline of knowing exactly where the operational costs of the CCOs are falling. and how ratepayers' money is being spent. So I think probably my question is directed to you, Mr. Mayor, and that's just around the wording and the intent of the paragraph that's labelled finance and value for money. Is your intent there to try and get deeper exposure of the operational costs in the CCOs? It doesn't mention it specifically, but it looks like that's what it's indicating.
I think the intention is, just as we are putting pressure on the council proper to find efficiencies, we should not be exempting the CCOs from going through the same organisational procedures. And, you know, look, we all know we need more investment. That's the point Councillor Fletcher was making. We need more investment in transport infrastructure. That does not relieve Auckland Transport of the responsibility to be constantly searching for efficiencies and value for money in what they do. And we're just trying to send that message across all of the CCOs, as we've given that message directly to Stephen Town and his team. We are not exempting the CCOs from that. So we are looking for them to come up with their own efficiencies. Yes, they need more money. That doesn't mean to say they're exempt from the responsibility to get better value from the money they're already utilising.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Cashman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Very briefly, folks, this is a letter of expectation. It's not a contract. And you want to put every ounce and everything into it, then we better start including things like lifting congestion on all roads for commercial traffic, protecting and quadruple laning all quarry routes. Now, the Auckland Transport Alignment Project and the Auckland Transport Sieving Mechanism for Prioritisation are both very good tools for giving priority for projects across the whole board. I don't believe it's our role at this point in time, under a letter of expectation, to drill down to the bottom of the rabbit hole. We need to keep up at the level that a letter of expectation is generally accepted to be at. That's all I have to say.
Yeah.
Yep.
Don't embarrass us,
Right.
save the money.
Councillor Quacks.
No, Mr. Chair, I actually, it's not this particular item that I want to speak to. I want to speak to one of the later letters of expectations.
Okay. Councillor Lee. Mike Lee.
Thank you. The committee has been invited to contribute to this draft letter, and it will be obviously finalised by the Mayor. So contribute I will. In terms of emissions, given this is a political statement, I think it's important to express what the public are concerned about, and one of them is the airport congestion problem. Without getting into too much detail, but when we use words, I think we have to be very careful what we're talking about. Another glaring omission which has been picked up is light rail, and it should be referred to. In terms of what is rapid transit and what is mass transit, people should be careful when using this not to cause confusion. It is a technical issue, and if we're giving letters of expectation to a bunch of technical people, we need to give the impression we know what we're talking about. Another omission, I believe, is the chronic problem of fare evasion on trains, and that also gives rise to antisocial behaviour. It is connected to antisocial behaviour. That is a major concern, and really the solution, the major part of the solution would be progressive gating. The Auckland Transport are reluctantly, years on, starting to gate some stations, but it's very limited, and they need to be encouraged to continue with gating stations. In terms of cycling, I think we need to be very careful when we're incorporating priority for cycling and walking into projects, about what projects it is. Like light rail and trains and buses, horses for courses. And so let's not be encouraging cycleways where logic would suggest busways. And so we need to think carefully about that. A glaring omission, I believe, is Skypath, where people cannot cycle on the Harbour Bridge, where presently people cannot cycle at all. And in the past, Auckland Transport has been opposed or very reluctant to support that. I think we need to invite Auckland Transport to share in helping to solve the funding issues around Skypath. In terms of benchmarking, the letter emphasises that, and I applaud it. I can tell you that Auckland Transport, probably like most organisations, is somewhat chary about benchmarking, which can easily be compared to other agencies or other jurisdictions, transport jurisdictions. And I think we need to emphasise benchmarking which is universal and comparable with other comparator cities. For instance, the fare box ratio, which is a Ministry of Transport requirement, Auckland Transport reports that differently to Wellington. In Auckland, we add in all the commercial services that are not subsidised at all, and lo and behold, the fare box ratio looks a bit better. That's not what the government wanted a fare box ratio to indicate. They wanted to see value for money for their subsidy investment. I won't go into too much more. I think we've covered it, but I'll make the point again that this is a political document, and it needs to articulate what the public are concerned about, not just a little bit better than what we've had in the past. Thank you.
Right, Richard. Oh, sorry, Councillor Hills.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, the Auckland Transport letter I'm pretty supportive of. That's good direction, especially around reallocating road space towards PT and active modes. That's a really good thing. The actual wording on local boards is not too bad here. So the main problems I see for local boards is the fact they need better earlier engagement with local boards. Auckland Transport, generally, if they know what's happening, local boards, well, in my experience, have been happy if they actually know what's going on, timing-wise, things like that. I actually think if local boards, and in my experience on a local board, if you work with the Auckland Transport staff, they are very open to changes and placemaking and having a say in the decisions anyway. So I think this will just strengthen that. But it's also that two-way relationship. If you're working with the staff, you actually get things done a lot easier. We got a lot of things done, like lifting pedestrian crossings when they weren't going to be, adding things to placemaking around parks, a whole lot of different things. And also with the, I'm assuming and hoping the Auckland Transport Local Board Capital Fund will stay, which does give some discretion for local boards to choose their own projects. But there is a risk with delegations that sometimes the political overrides the evidential, and that's, you know, we've asked for things before because there's been a few loud voices, and Auckland Transport's come back and said there's no evidence that we need to spend money there. So there's a balance between, you know, a few loud voices in the community and other areas who maybe don't speak up as much, don't get the maintenance or the things that they need, because it starts getting based on who's got the loudest voice rather than the evidence. So I think it's really good direction. Good to see cycling in there. Really like to see, you know, us push for the Urban Cycleways Fund to be extended. We can do a lot of things there. Yeah, so I'm pretty happy with the direction, and yeah, I think if we overcomplicate it, it's just going to be an expensive mess, and we're going to have little bits of things going on in all different directions instead of moving forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Hills. So, great. Right, we're now moving on to water care. Going to get quicker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just make 4 quick points about the water care letter. So this is on page 15. The key focus for water care really is to get them working in a more coordinated and collaborative way with the rest of the council group, particularly on the Housing Infrastructure Fund, to optimise the benefits which council can get from any investment from that fund. We're proactively participating in the Central Interceptor Optimisation Working Group. There's the point around the out-of-sequence urban development that was mentioned before and discussed. And the final thing was around demand management and seeing a narrative in the SOI about the kind of measures that Watercare are taking to manage water demand. Thank you.
Councillor Darby.
I've got one recommendation here for consideration, and that is that there be a narrative in the third paragraph along the lines that Watercare implement and measure a more ambitious water demand management program, including smart metering for the future. And I'll forward that through to David Wood.
Agree with that.
So what will that mean regards capital costs, Councillor Darby?
Well, if you heard the